Thousands of Americans took to the streets to protest Donald Trump's actions, including the president's vision for U.S. foreign policy. Will the tariffs affect American arms production and, in effect, the security of Europe, which relies heavily on it? And is Europe on a collision course with the U.S. when it comes to supporting Ukraine? To talk about this and more, we're joined by Diane Francis, columnist, political commentator and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, EU is pumping huge sums into reviving its own defense industry. That comes after repeated calls from Washington that it has to pay more for its security. On the other hand, the US would prefer Europeans to buy American-made weapons, as they used to. And on top of that, Donald Trump introduces tariffs, which can largely hit the bilateral trade, including weapons, of course. So how is Europe to act in this regard?
Well, I think Europe is in the same boat everybody else in the world is in. Trump has decided to weaponize tariffs to seize the control over the world trading system. And he's now going to go about dictating the tariffs to nations that they can charge America or that America will charge them. And there's always going to be strings attached. So this is a revolutionary, crazy idea, which gives him control over all of the world trading, but also gives him leverage over every ally and competitor that would allow him to dictate the terms that he wants, whether it's military expenditures or import-exports or whatever. It's really quite something. And of course, I'm sure everybody is aware that his announcement last week has cost everybody in the world money who owns stocks and bonds. I mean, the world stock markets have collapsed, and we don't know what's going to happen Monday. So this is a huge catastrophic problem for every country.
Now, about controlling your allies, as you have mentioned, Brussels has launched an initiative called Ukraine to EU to speed up the integration process. Now, in the meantime, Kiev is negotiating the so-called rare earth minerals deal with the US, which, according to Ukrainians, could put the future EU accession in question. So, is Kiev in the position to reject the deal in its current shape, and will Donald Trump simply allow it to happen?
Well, in this whole new configuration with the tariffs at the background, there's a couple of new things that make what's going on in Europe more compelling. The European Union is a bigger economy than the United States. And the more Europe integrates itself quickly, the more it is bulletproof from being pushed around by Trump over tariffs. In other words, if you trade amongst yourselves tariff-free, then you don't face all these import-export problems that he's trying to leverage in order to get what he wants from various countries. As for Ukraine, the minerals deal is absolutely essential to keeping Donald Trump on target to try and bring about a truce. And the truce is, Putin is not cooperating. Trump is getting annoyed with it. So, I think that Ukraine has really no choice but to stay the course, to continue to fight, to continue to push the Americans to help them. And they will be able to join the European Union if they want to, and if Europe wants them. I don't see any reason why not.
Mm-hmm. Now, well, under Trump's auspices, Ukraine and Russia have negotiated a partial ceasefire in the Black Sea. Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, says that Moscow is using it to attack Ukrainian cities from the warships. Now, the full ceasefire seems as distant as ever. Now, is the US ready to put true pressure on Moscow? What do you think? And that would also make Donald Trump admit a mistake when it comes to his relations with Vladimir Putin. Can he afford such a mistake?
Well, Trump wants a deal. He really does. That's a very important campaign promise he made. He was foolish to say he could do it quickly. He's also been foolish to think that Putin is an honorable man that you can negotiate in a reasonable way with. He no sooner, talked about a kind of a partial ceasefire than he's now bombing daycare centers and playgrounds, killing children in Ukraine. Putin is. This is horrifying. He just keeps pushing and ignoring and just postponing the possibility of a truce as he can gain a few feet every day, possibly of Ukrainian territory. So, Trump is I think committed to making a deal, but I think, and I'm glad that he's certainly losing respect for Putin. He's got to be.
Now, about the attack you have just mentioned, a Russian missile strikes a playground in Ukraine, kills 20, including 9 children, 70 were wounded. The U.S. Embassy refuses to name Russia the responsible for this atrocity. How to interpret it?
It's cowardly. I think it's cowardly. I mean, if they're the culprit, they should be outed. And but the Americans are Putin. The game that they seem to be playing in these negotiations is to, and we saw it, beat up Zelensky so that he doesn't ask for too much, make him malleable and agreeable to almost any truce, and then soften up and be nice to Putin in the hopes that he will make a deal. Well, Zelensky is. I thought it was disgraceful what they did to Zelensky. It's a heroic country. And I think that everybody is realizing, including Trump, that buttering up Putin doesn't make him a nice guy. He'll never be a nice guy. He's a monster. He's a mass murderer. And he has to be treated very quickly. And when he does something like have his people purposely destroy 20 little children, despite talking peace truce, that has to be outed and action should be taken of some kind. Now, he's threatening the oil price sanctions. That's the way to stop Putin. He keeps holding it over his head. It's not working. So he's going to maybe have to just do it.
Now,
I hope he does.
To be perfectly honest, today the American side said this was the Russian missile that killed 9 children in Kryvyi Rih. But it took some time, nevertheless. Now, British and the French delegations of the so-called coalition of the willing are discussing future peacekeeping mission in Ukraine. It's something very much against the Kremlin, which has already said this means basically war with NATO. Now, does it mean that Europe is no longer afraid of Putin rattling his saber?
Oh, I don't know. He has been playing the nuclear card all the way along. He moved nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons into Ukraine during the war. He's always, and Medvedev goes around tweeting out that, we're going to drop the big one on somebody, all of that sort of thing. I think that their bluff has been called. I think their red lines have been crossed and nothing's happened. So I think it's safe to assume that Britain and France will probably put together some kind of coalition force or coalition of the willing or whatever you want to call it, and that there will be boots on the ground from Europe. Europe has to do this. It has to do this because it's the only way that Putin will finally realize that he's got about as much as he can ever get.
Now, we've begun with tariffs, and let's also conclude with them too. One of Donald Trump's closest associates, by the way, the one whose policies were protested yesterday in the US, Elon Musk, said right after the announcement of tariffs that he wishes for a zero tariff situation between Europe and the US. Now, is Tesla owner to rebel against his president?
Well, I think that you're seeing what's going to be happening. Americans are horrified. Republicans and Democrats alike. Everybody's horrified. Anybody who has a stock market portfolio is looking at having lost 5 to 10% of their net value. This is very scary. People are on edge and anxious all across the country. Even if they don't own stocks, they know somebody who does. Companies don't know what to do. If you're a company, a multinational company like Elon Musk, it's no surprise, and I'm glad he's coming forward. He's not one of the guys who proposed this tariff nonsense. He's a guy who has to live with the consequences. Tesla buys and sells parts and cars all over the world with all kinds of countries, despite differing tariff barriers. And this is a nightmare for a company like him. And he's just saying, who's this guy, Peter Navarro, who thought of this idea? This is a bad idea. And, Europe and the United States, forget tariffs altogether. Let's just go to free trade completely again. So, I think he's going to be instrumental in maybe getting rid of the tariff policy, or maybe Trump pulling back on it somewhat. But it's open warfare, and I think it's a healthy sign.
We'll see in the close future. Diane Francis, a columnist, political commentator, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more here on TVP World.